Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown, co-author of the book, Black and White, How the Left is Destroying the Dream of Martin Luther King and Our Founding Fathers. If you are sick of the Black Lives Matter narrative on race relations and you want a right-leaning perspective, go ahead and pick up a copy. There is a link in the description. And of course, if you're new to this channel, please share, like, and subscribe. I've been talking about COVID-19, the Great Reset. And if you see in my previous videos, my source for all my information is they themselves, the people who came up with this concept. And of course, means we're talking about Klaus Schwab and his book, COVID-19, the Great Reset. And, my goal was always to get the information from the people themselves rather than be accused of spreading misinformation and propaganda because we're not quoting them directly. So I like to use their own words against them to say, hey, they said this. I'm not making it up. It's in their book. I read it on this page. Here's what they said. I'm not a disinformation agent. And when it comes to this issue of big government, one thing I like to stress is that you can call it what you want, the Great Reset, the New World Order. It's all the same thing, and it's a very basic concept. And it's that people in power who control the government want more power and control. You can give it any fancy name you want. It's the same thing. And with COVID-19, the Great Reset, it's just more of the old thing we've seen for the last 100 years, post-World War I, post-World War II, same nonsense, different name, different scenario, a crisis that they want to take advantage of to expand the powers of government and encroach on our freedom. So let's go right to the source himself and see what he says about the role of government. Let's start with this first excerpt. He says, one of the great lessons of the past 5 centuries in Europe and America is this: acute crises contribute to boosting the power of the state. It's always been the case, and there's no reason why it should be different with the COVID-19 pandemic. And he's right. Every time there has been a crisis, we've always deflected toward the state and the use of state power to deal with that crisis. So that's not anything crazy. The issue is not that the state doesn't have a role, maybe a growing role in addressing the crises. The question is, how far does that go? And the problem we have is that every time there's an expansion of the state to deal with an issue, it doesn't retract when the issue has been solved. Whatever growth there is, it's there to stay. We've seen it after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and surveillance state. And if you see my last video talking about civil liberties and the surveillance state, he points out that anytime the state grows, people initially fight back, but enough time passes and you get used to it, and then it becomes the new normal. And that is the issue with what's going on right now with these COVID-19, potentially these passports and all these new requirements for basic life in the United States. This may become the norm in the future if we don't stop it right now in its crib from happening. And that's why the next few years are so critical. Because if they get to this next level where they can have a database and go, you can't leave your state or enter into this state without this, this vaccine passport, we are in big trouble, and it's over right there. So I don't want to be alarmist, but if they get to that next level, that next step, we are in a lot of trouble. He goes on to say, today, the situation is fundamentally different. In the intervening decades in the Western world, the role of the state has shrunk considerably. This is a situation that is set to change because it is hard to imagine how an exogenous shock of such magnitude as the one inflicted by COVID-19 could be addressed with purely market-based solutions. Well, I'm not sure if the role of the government has really shrunk. The state or the bureaucracy in the United States has expanded steadily since the Great Depression. So I'm not sure in what sense he's saying, what, tax brackets? I know there was tax brackets during the 70s that were, 80, 90%. But to say that the state has shrunk considerably, I'm not sure about that. That doesn't seem to be a reflection of what's happened, at least here in the United States. He goes on to say, in a surprising and sudden turnaround, the idea, which would have been an anathema just a few years ago, that governments can further the public good while runaway economies without supervision can wreak havoc on social welfare, may now become the norm. On a dial that measures the continuum between the government and the markets, the needle has decisively moved toward the left. Again, he's talking about this idea that we didn't have the government involved already. So what he's setting up here is this idea that, the government wasn't really involved and things are out of control. So now we can bring the government back. Are you insane? The government has been involved in every aspect of our lives. A few years ago, the last 100 years. So this idea that this is a new thing, the government jumping back in to regulate stuff, it's nonsense. Government's always freaking been there, because what he's trying to do is pin blame on the lack of government for why things get out of control. And that's important because we look now at COVID-19, and now we're learning that Fauci was funding gain-of-function research. So this whole pandemic that he says needs government, the government may have been the cause in the first place. How convenient. They start the fire and then they jump up and down going, hey, we're the ones who can put it out. Well, maybe if we stop starting fires, we won't have this problem. He goes on. For the first time since Margaret Thatcher captured the zeitgeist of an era when declaring that there is no such thing as society, governments have the upper hand. Everything that comes in the post-pandemic era will lead us to rethink government's role. Rather than simply fixing market failures when they arise, they should, as suggested by the economist Mariana Mazzucato, move towards actively shaping and creating markets that deliver sustainable and inclusive growth. They should also ensure that partnerships with business involving government funds are driven by public interest, not profit. Those buzzwords again, deliver sustainable and inclusive growth. That is left-wing babble for saying that the government should have a role in redistribution and controlling outcomes. And as we saw back in 2008 when we had the stimulus package, when this happens and all this money flows out toward all these organizations, and he says here they should be driven by public interest, not profit. What did it end up being? Kickbacks to people who support a political party. In the case of the stimulus back with Barack Obama, all that money didn't go to fixing the infrastructure and as they advertised as being something that was going to stimulate growth of the economy. It was just a kickback to the different political groups that supported the Democrats. And it turns out to be one big, scheme to shuffle money around. So you see things like sustainable and inclusive growth, you're hearing BS. But this next part here, he says, is the thing that we need to pay attention to the most, because it gives you a look into the insight of how he views government and how he views we the people. Looking to the future, governments will most likely, but with different degrees of intensity, decide that it's in the best interest of society to rewrite some of the rules of the game and permanently increase their role. As happened in the 1930s in the US when massive unemployment and economic insecurity were progressively addressed by a larger role for government. Today, a similar course of action is likely to characterize the foreseeable future. Did you notice what he said? And this is really telling. He says the governments will most likely decide that it's in the best interest of society to rewrite some of the rules of the game. I thought in a democracy, the government was a representative of we the people. But he's saying the government is going to decide for us that, we're going to change things here, permanently increase our role. We're making this decision. Does that sound to you like a democracy where we have a representative government that responds to the will of the people? He's saying here pretty explicitly that the government will decide to do this on their own. And by God, look around right now with the Biden administration and the push for the vaccination and the rules as far as if you have more than 100 people in your company, you have to be vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. So what he's talking about, and again, he wrote this book in the spring of 2020, is happening right now. The government is unilaterally, without our consent, deciding that they're going to change the rules of the game and increase the role permanently. And he talks about here the 1930s, the massive unemployment. We look back now at the 1930s and the Great Depression, and we realize, what was the catalyst for the Great Depression? Was it we the people, or was it the Federal Reserve System and our government and the banking system messing with things? And of course, there's that debate of what caused the Great Depression. If you're an establishment, economist or somebody protecting the status quo, you're going to say, well, it was a bunch of different issues and, it all came together for this one thing. But if you're a little more conspiratorial, you will say the Federal Reserve System and the banking system basically screwed over the entire country and caused that Great Depression. And of course, we had World War II, we ramped up manufacturing, and then after we came out of World War II, we were in a much better place. So again, we have the issues of what is the government's role in solving problems? And my thing is, how many problems is actually because of the government and not because of just random chance things happening? So they set the fires and then they put it out and they give themselves increasing powers to do so, when in fact, they were the problem in the first place. And then secondly here, they talk about grabbing power and deciding to do it unilaterally without our consent. That does not sound like democracy. That sounds like fascism. So that's his words, not mine. He wants the government, or saying the governments may decide to grab power and change things permanently. And we're seeing that right now. So whatever you call it, Great Reset, New World Order, same thing, people in power trying to get more power for themselves and to take away our freedoms and liberties. So that's what it is. That's it for now. Again, if you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe. And coming soon, I will have a video on critical race theory and what it means for the future of this country. And it's very interesting. The founding father of critical race theory, Richard Delgado, talks about South Africa potentially being a model for what we could see here in the United States. Look out for it in the future. I'll see you soon.